My name is Taylor Adams, and our presentation will be over the effects that the Ring of Fire has on Japan. A quote by U.S. geophysicist John Bellini quoted, "Japan is one of the most seismically active areas in the world." And after this presentation, you will understand why this is definitely true. First, let's talk about Japan's location. It lies on the Pacific coast of East Asia. More absolute, it lies right on top of the Ring of Fire, which is the most active part of the Pacific Plate, which we will later discuss. Japan's present-day population is around 127 million people. It holds the largest mountain, Mount Fuji. It consists of 6,852 islands, and most importantly, it's prone to natural disasters such as volcanoes, earthquakes, and tsunamis. Japan was created millions of years ago by subduction. Subduction is where one tectonic plate moves under another plate, sinking into Earth's mantle. The Japanese islands were formed by volcanoes. The Pacific Plate slid under the Eurasian Plate, forming mountainous landforms, which is Japan. All of this activity was on top of the Pacific Ring of Fire. You can see in this image that the plate going under on the left would be the Pacific Plate, pushing up under the Eurasian Plate, which then forms volcanoes. The Pacific Plate is the largest tectonic plate, making it very dangerous. When it collides with another plate, you can feel the activity in other areas of the world. The Pacific Plate causes so many earthquakes because its plates move so much faster than others. The places where more earthquakes occur is called the Ring of Fire. The Ring of Fire is a chain of volcanoes that line the Pacific Rim. In all, it is made up of 452 volcanoes. It is responsible for 75% of active volcanoes and 90% of earthquakes. This is an image of the Ring of Fire. You can see that where Japan is located, it has the most red area, which is the area of the most volcanic activity. Like Japan, tectonic plates were shifted. More specifically, the Pacific Plate's interaction with smaller surrounding plates. This interaction created tremendous energy, which then melted rock into magma. The magma rose to the surface, which then becomes lava. This then forms the underground volcanoes known as the Ring of Fire. Like many natural-made things come consequences, and we will focus on the consequences of Japan. First is volcanic activity. There are at least 60 active volcanoes in Japan. One of the most explosive volcanoes in South Japan is Mount Kirishima, and it erupts very frequently. Earthquakes are another consequence of Japan's Ring of Fire location. They experience around 1,500 earthquakes every year and experience tremors on a daily basis. Earthquakes are so common in Japan because not only does the country lie on top of the dangerous Pacific Plate, but they lie on top of Eurasian, North American, and the Philippine Plate. Any two of these plates can rub or collide into one another and can build up this force onto one another for centuries. Once the pressure is finally released, they pull away. Earthquakes then occur. The image on the right gives you a visual of how close Japan is to all four of these tectonic plates. Earthquakes occur all over the world and can be anywhere from mild to severe. Because of Japan's location, they usually experience the more harsh earthquakes. Here are some examples to put in perspective how great Japan earthquakes are. The Great Kanto earthquake, which has a magnitude of 7.9, killed 140,000 people, destroyed 700,000 homes. This Japanese disaster was so great, the day is now National Disaster Prevention Day. The Kobe earthquake was a 6.8 magnitude and killed 6,000 people. What you see here is the Richter scale, which explains the magnitude of earthquakes. You can see that the two earthquakes just have a 1.1 magnitude of a difference, but this small difference was the difference between 6,000 deaths and 140,000 deaths. The last consequence I'll be talking about is tsunamis. Tsunamis are triggered from earthquakes. Look at the image on the right and you can see that the two plates are thrusting against one another, which with enough energy can move water. When the energy is huge enough, it can move an enormous amount of water that creates waves hundreds of miles long. When the waves get closer to land, they steepen and lift up, which is the actual tsunami itself, and then damages everything in its path. Now you know 3 of the biggest consequences of Japan living on the most dangerous part of the Ring of Fire. There is an event in Japan's history that includes all 3 of these, a chain of events: earthquakes, tsunami, and volcanic eruption. These chain of events take place on March 11, 2011 in Honshu, Japan. The biggest earthquake in Japan's history occurred at a magnitude of 9.0 and recorded as the 5th largest in the world. Japan experienced over 150 aftershocks that were a magnitude of 5 or greater, and over 24 that were a magnitude of 6 or greater. They experienced one aftershock that was even larger than the magnitude of 7.1. You can see on the Richter scale that Honshu's earthquake greatly passed up the other 2 we talked about. Its biggest aftershock was even bigger than Kobe earthquake that killed 6,000 people. So you know that this earthquake took a huge toll on Japan. After this tremendous earthquake, a tsunami occurred, just like I explained before, that tsunamis can trigger from these quakes. The earthquake was a 15.2 mile deep earthquake, which was more than enough to create a deadly tsunami. It was so big that it affected parts of Hawaii and California. The energy from the earthquake created 2 waves 20 or more feet high to crash on Japan's coast. Of course, the quake triggered a volcanic eruption at the Kirishima mountain range, making the largest blast in 52 years. The earthquake, tsunami, and eruption from the Ring of Fire of course affected Japan and its residents tremendously. It took the lives of 20,896 people, 5,300 were injured, and over 7,000 people were still reported missing after months of searching. On top of those chilling statistics, Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant experienced a nuclear crisis. This power plant gives 1/3 of Japan's power, but the day after the natural disasters, that would end for a while. Reactor 1 exploded, causing radioactive materials to be found outside the plant. After that, meltdowns in reactors 1 and 3 were found, resulting in over 200,000 residents evacuated from their homes. There was then a second explosion at Reactor 3. Hundreds of people were ordered to stay indoors, and after that, 2 more explosions occurred, making that 4 explosions in the nuclear power plant, sending off radioactive materials into other parts of Japan and the atmosphere. That in fact affected people in a 20-mile radius of the plant. They were not able to use air conditioning. They were advised to keep their windows closed and stay indoors until this was cleared up. One of Japan's biggest transport networks were shut down after the disaster. Tohoku Expressway was suspended for a couple weeks, leaving many people stranded at stations all across the city. Aside from nuclear problems, temporary housing was also an issue. 230,000 people were still homeless in 2015, which was 4 years after the disaster struck. The ones who were lucky enough to be picked for housing lived in a 320 square foot home with 50 people. Workers could not just move fast enough in building these homes due to resources needed and thousands of people needing housing. This would take a very long time. There was major flooding after the disaster. Shallow cracks were found in the Fujinuma irrigation dam in Sacagawea. Before repair, it ruptured, causing major flooding, which washed away even more homes and left even more people to lose their lives. Japan's economy was definitely hurt after the disaster. They had to spend big amount of money, as big as $300 billion in damages. It took 5 years of recovery, and the damages done, it shows that there was 25 million tons of debris left. All the evidence I have given, from the natural consequences to the horrible effects on Japan, is solely because of its location on the Ring of Fire, being at the meeting of 4 tectonic plates. If it wasn't located atop of the deadliest, most active part of the Pacific Plate, Japan's past would have faced less deaths, nuclear damages, homelessness, and spending of billions of dollars on rebuilding. If location was different, same would go for their future. If not all of that was convincing enough to know that location is the reason for Japan's disasters, you can see on this chart of 2011 earthquakes on USGS Earthquake Hazard Program that in 2011 alone, Japan faced tremendously more deaths than any other country located on the Ring of Fire. Even if Japan was located a little further from this part of the Atlantic Plate and Ring of Fire, not even out of the Ring of Fire completely, Japan would see a decrease in the effects of the harsh natural disasters the Ring of Fire brings to them, and will continue to bring them for hundreds of years to come.